I am standing in a hospital cafeteria, pretending to read a magazine. 20 feet away, my 4 children are sitting at a table. They do not know I am here. They think I am upstairs in my room, sedated, recovering from bypass surgery, but I am right here. Listening? Fletcher is talking first. He is the oldest. A cardiologist in Boston. He speaks with the confidence of a man who has never been told no. He says, "We need to be realistic. Dad has nothing. The house is falling apart. The truck is worthless. If he needs long-term care, we are looking at a financial sinkhole." Gemma nods. She is the second oldest. A corporate lawyer in Atlanta. She says, "I ran the numbers. Even if we sold everything, we are talking maybe $80,000. That does not cover 6 months in a decent facility." Sutton, my third child, the tech entrepreneur from San Francisco, leans back in his chair and sighs. He says, "So what are we supposed to do? Pull straws to see who gets stuck with him?" And then there is Cordelia, my youngest, my baby girl, the interior designer from Philadelphia. She looks at her brothers and sister and says the words that will stay with me until the day I die. She says, "I love Daddy, but I have a life. I have clients. I cannot put everything on hold to babysit a 74-year-old man who never planned for his own future." I close the magazine. I walk back to the elevator. I press the button for the 3rd floor. And I do not say a word, because here is the thing my children do not know. I am not broke. I am worth over $60 million. I own more land than anyone in this county. I have investments in private equity, commercial real estate, and agricultural trusts. I have a portfolio that has been compounding quietly for over 40 years. But I live in a small house. I drive a rusted 1994 Chevy pickup. I eat TV dinners and wear old clothes. I let my children believe I have nothing, because I wanted to see who they really are. And now I know. My name is Earl Meacham. I am 74 years old. I am a retired steelworker from Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. And this is the story of how my own children mocked me, pitied me, and planned their lives around my poverty until my will was read out loud. Let me take you back to the beginning, so you understand exactly how we got here. But before I continue, I need to ask you something. You clicked on this video. You are here. You are already invested in what happens next. But I wonder, have you subscribed yet? I am not asking for money. I am not asking you to buy anything. I am asking for 1 click, 1 second of your time. You see, a lot of people watch videos like this all the way to the end. They feel the emotions. They share it with friends, but they never subscribe. They take the story and leave nothing behind. If this video means something to you, if you want to hear more stories like this, take 1 second right now and hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to this channel. Do not be the person who watches and walks away. Subscribe now, and let us continue. I was born in 1950 in a small town called Greensburg, about 30 miles east of Pittsburgh. My father worked the blast furnaces at the Irvin Works. My mother raised 5 children in a house that was too small and too cold. We had 1 bathroom. We had a wood-burning stove that never heated the back bedrooms properly. We had enough food to survive, but never enough to feel comfortable. I learned early that complaining was weakness, that a man's worth was not measured by what he said, but by what he did when no one was watching. My father died when I was 17, black lung. He coughed for 2 years, and then one morning, he did not wake up. My mother buried him in a cemetery behind the Methodist church, and 3 days later she went back to work at the textile mill because the bills did not care about grief. I dropped out of high school to help support the family. Got a job at the same steel plant that killed my father. Figured I would do it for a few years, save some money, maybe go to trade school. 46 years later, I walked out of that plant for the last time with a plaque, a handshake, and a pension that barely covered my property taxes. But here is what most people do not understand about me. I was never just a steelworker. I met Lorraine in 1971 at a church social. She was 20 years old, brown hair, green eyes, a laugh that sounded like music. She saw something in me that I did not see in myself. She said I was smart. She said I was careful. She said I thought 3 steps ahead, while most men could barely manage one. We got married in 1972. Small ceremony. 40 guests. Her mother made the cake. By 1974, we had Fletcher. By 1977, we had Gemma. Sutton came in 1980, and Cordelia arrived in 1983, a surprise that Lorraine called our miracle baby. I worked double shifts to provide for them. I missed school plays. I missed baseball games. I missed recitals and birthdays and weekend mornings. But I made sure they had everything they needed: clothes, food, books, a safe home. And quietly, without telling anyone, I started building something else. In 1978, I bought my first piece of land. A farmer named Willa Hensley was selling 43 acres of rocky pasture after her husband passed. She wanted $18,000. I offered 12. We settled on 14, and I paid it off in 3 years by working overtime and skipping vacations. People in town thought I was foolish. What was a steelworker going to do with 43 acres of rocks and weeds? But I understood something they did not. Land is patient. Land does not care about trends or recessions or stock market crashes. Land waits. And if you hold it long enough, land pays you back. In 1983, a regional grocery chain needed access to the county road that ran through my property. They wanted to build a distribution center nearby. I leased them a right-of-way for $75,000. I retained full ownership of the land. That was the moment I realized I was not just a steelworker anymore. I was an investor. By 1989, I owned 220 acres across 4 parcels. I had quietly invested in a grain elevator through a business partner named Donald Renfro. I had purchased stock in a small manufacturing company before it went public. I had started a trust that no one knew about. Not my wife, not my children, not my neighbors. I drove the same truck, wore the same clothes, lived in the same house. But my net worth was growing by 6 figures every year, and I never told a soul. You might be wondering why. Why would a man hide his wealth from his own family? Why would he let his children grow up thinking he was poor? The answer is simple. I wanted to see who they really were. Money changes people. I have seen it happen 100 times. A man comes into wealth, and suddenly everyone around him becomes friendlier, more attentive, more interested in his opinions. But that is not love. That is positioning. I wanted to know if my children would respect me when I had nothing to offer them. I wanted to know if they would call me, visit me, include me in their lives, not because of what I could give them, but because of who I was. So I lived simply. I let them believe I was struggling. I watched, and I waited. Let me tell you about my children. Not who they are now, but who they were. Because somewhere between childhood and adulthood, I lost them. And I have spent the last 20 years trying to understand how. Fletcher was my firstborn. He was a serious child. Quiet, focused. He had my eyes and his mother's patience. When he was 11 years old, we discovered he had a congenital heart defect, a small hole that the doctors said could cause serious problems if left untreated. The insurance company denied the surgery, said it was elective, said we could wait and see. I did not wait and see. I paid for that surgery out of pocket. $32,000. I worked double shifts for 2 years to cover it. I sold my hunting rifles. I cashed in a small retirement account. Fletcher never knew. Lorraine and I agreed to keep it from him. We did not want him to feel like a burden. We did not want him to grow up thinking he owed us something. He recovered fully. He grew up healthy. He went to college, then medical school, then became a cardiologist in Boston. And somewhere along the way, he forgot where he came from. The last time Fletcher visited, he walked through my house like he was inspecting a condemned building. He looked at the water stain on the ceiling. He looked at the cracks in the kitchen tiles. He looked at the worn carpet in the hallway. And then he looked at me with an expression I will never forget. It was pity. Pure, undisguised pity. He said, "Dad, have you thought about selling this place? You could move into a retirement community, something more manageable." I asked him what he meant by manageable. He said, "Something you can afford." I smiled and told him I was doing just fine. He did not believe me. Gemma was my second child. She was sharp from the very beginning. Argumentative, quick-witted. She could win a debate before her opponent even realized they were in one. When she decided to go to law school, I was proud. When she got accepted to Emory, I was even prouder. But law school is expensive, and Gemma did not qualify for enough financial aid. So I did what fathers do. I paid off her student loans. $64,000. Delivered anonymously through a third-party financial gift processed by a lawyer I trusted. Gemma never knew. She thought she received a special scholarship from an alumni fund. She bragged about it for years. Said it was proof that hard work gets rewarded. She was right. Just not in the way she thought. Now Gemma calls me once a year on my birthday. The calls last about 3 minutes. She asks how I am doing. I say, fine. She asks if I need anything. I say, no. She says she is very busy with work. I say, I understand. And then she hangs up. Last year, she asked me if I had considered applying for Medicaid. She said it might help with my medical expenses. She said it in a voice that sounded like she was reading from a script. I told her I would look into it. I did not tell her that I have more money in a single investment account than she will earn in the next 10 years. Sutton was my third child. He was the dreamer, the one who always had a new idea, a new project, a new vision for how the world should work. When he was 23, he moved to San Francisco to start a tech company. He had no money, no investors, and no experience. He slept on a friend's couch for 6 months while he tried to get his idea off the ground. What Sutton does not know is that his first investor was me. I funneled $50,000 through a shell company that Donald Renfro helped me set up. Sutton thought it came from an angel investor named Patterson Capital. He pitched to them. They said yes. He cried. Patterson Capital was me. That $50,000 became his seed round. He raised more money. He built his company. He sold it 4 years later for $11 million. He never thanked me. Because he never knew. Sutton is successful now. He wears expensive sneakers and talks about disruption and synergy and scalable solutions. He dates women who look like they belong in magazines. He posts photos from rooftop bars in cities I have never visited. He calls me maybe twice a year. The last time we spoke, he offered to send me a check for $500. He said he knew things were tight for me. He said he wanted to help. $500. I thanked him and declined. He sounded relieved. And then there is Cordelia, my youngest, my baby girl, the one who used to fall asleep in my arms while I hummed the same song over and over. When Cordelia decided to start her interior design business, she needed capital. She applied for a small business grant through a foundation in Philadelphia, $10,000. She got it. She cried when she opened the letter. She said it was validation. She said it proved that her vision mattered. What she did not know is that I funded that grant. I donated $25,000 to the foundation with a specific request that $10,000 go to Cordelia Meacham's application. She never knew. She still does not know. Cordelia visits more than the others, maybe twice a year. But when she visits, she does not see me. She sees the house. She sees the leaky roof. She sees the peeling paint. She sees the rusted truck in the driveway. Last year, she stood in my living room and looked around with tears in her eyes. She said, "Daddy, you worked your whole life. How is this all you have to show for it?" I smiled and said nothing. Because what could I say? That the land behind this house is worth $14 million? That I own 6 commercial properties across 3 counties? That my net worth is higher than all 4 of my children combined? I said nothing. Because I was still waiting, still hoping that one of them would see me. Not my house, not my truck, not my clothes. Me. Let me tell you about my 75th birthday. I had been planning it quietly for months. Not a party, just a dinner. I wanted all 4 of my children in the same room for one night. It had been 3 years since that had happened. 3 years since all of them were together under my roof. I called each of them personally. I did not leave voicemails. I did not send texts. I called and spoke to them directly. Fletcher said he would try to make it, but he had a conference in Chicago that weekend. He said he would see what he could move around. Gemma said she had a big case going to trial. She said she would try to fly in for a few hours if she could. Sutton said he was launching a new product. He said it was really bad timing. He said he would definitely make it next year. And Cordelia said yes immediately. She said she would be there. She said she was looking forward to it. The week of my birthday, I got 3 phone calls. Fletcher called first. He said the conference was mandatory. He said his hospital administrator would not approve the absence. He said he was very sorry. Gemma called second. She said the trial got extended. She said she could not leave her client in the middle of proceedings. She said she would send a gift. Sutton called third. He said the product launch got moved up. He said investors were flying in from Tokyo. He said he would FaceTime me on the actual day. 3 children, 3 excuses, 3 variations of the same message. You are not important enough. On my 75th birthday, I sat alone in my kitchen. I had made a pot roast. Lorraine's recipe, the one she used to make on special occasions. I set 5 places at the table. 1 for me, 4 for my children. I waited. At 6 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sutton. It said, "Happy birthday, Dad. Crazy day here. We'll call tomorrow." He did not call tomorrow. At 6:30, my phone buzzed again. It was an email from Gemma. It was a link to an edible arrangement she had ordered. It arrived 3 days late. At 7 o'clock, Fletcher sent a voicemail. I listened to it twice. It was 14 seconds long. He said, "Hey Dad, happy birthday. Sorry I couldn't make it. Let's catch up soon." We did not catch up soon. Cordelia did not call. She did not text. She did not send anything. I ate alone that night. I sat at the head of the table with 4 empty chairs around me. I looked at the pot roast, at the mashed potatoes, at the green beans I had cooked the way Lorraine used to make them, and I thought about my wife. Lorraine passed away 8 years ago. Cancer. She fought for 14 months, and then one morning, she closed her eyes and did not open them again. When she was dying, she made me promise to keep the family together. She said, "Earl, you are the glue now. Do not let them drift apart." I promised her I would try. But sitting at that table on my 75th birthday, I realized I had failed. My children had not drifted apart from each other. They had drifted apart from me. 3 days later, Cordelia showed up unannounced. She knocked on my door at 2 in the afternoon. She was carrying a small gift bag and wearing an expression I recognized. It was guilt. She said, "Daddy, I am so sorry." The week got away from me. I completely lost track of the date. I told her it was all right. I told her I understood. I invited her inside. She sat at my kitchen table. She looked around the room. She saw the water stain on the ceiling. She saw the crack in the window. She saw the old refrigerator that hums too loud. And then she said the words, "Daddy, you worked your whole life. How is this all you have to show for it?" I looked at my daughter, my baby girl, the one I secretly funded, the one I have loved since the moment she took her first breath. And I smiled. I said, "Maybe this is exactly what I wanted to show for it." She did not understand. She looked at me like I was senile, like the old man had finally lost his grip on reality. She stayed for 45 minutes. She promised to visit more often. She hugged me at the door and drove away in a car that cost more than my first house. I watched her taillights disappear down Miller Road. And then I went inside and updated my will. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you called your parents? Not texted, called. When was the last time you visited without an occasion? Without a birthday or a holiday forcing you to show up? When was the last time you sat with them and actually listened? I am not asking to judge you. I am asking because this story is not really about me. It is about you. It is about the people in your life who are waiting by the phone, who are setting extra places at the table, who are wondering if they matter to you at all. If this video is making you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is trying to tell you something. Now let me ask you another question. You have been watching this video for a while now. You know my story. You know my pain. And yet, have you subscribed? If you have not, I have to wonder why. Is it laziness? Is it forgetfulness? Or is it something else? Subscribing takes less than 2 seconds. It costs you absolutely nothing. But it tells the person who made this video that their work matters, that the hours spent writing and editing and producing were not wasted. If you cannot do that one small thing, then maybe you are more like my children than you realize. Taking and taking, never giving anything back. Prove me wrong. Subscribe right now. Or scroll down to the comments and tell me why you refuse. I will be reading. 6 months after my 75th birthday, I had a heart attack. It happened on a Thursday morning. I was walking from the barn to the house when I felt a pressure in my chest. Not pain at first. Just pressure. Like someone was sitting on my ribcage. By the time I reached the back porch, I could not breathe. I sat down on the steps and called 911. The ambulance arrived in 11 minutes. The paramedic said I was lucky. Another 20 minutes and I would have been gone. I spent 4 days in the hospital. They said I needed bypass surgery. Triple bypass. My arteries were 90% blocked. They said it was a miracle. I was still alive. I called each of my children from the hospital bed. Fletcher answered on the 3rd ring. He listened carefully. He asked clinical questions. He said he would consult with my doctors and get back to me. He did not offer to visit. Gemma answered after 6 rings. She sounded distracted. I could hear her typing in the background. She said she was very worried. She said she would try to fly down after the trial was over. The trial lasted another 3 weeks. Sutton did not answer. I left a voicemail. He texted me back 2 hours later. It said, "Just saw this. Praying for you, Dad. Keep me updated." He did not call. Cordelia cried. She said she would come immediately. She arrived 2 days later. The surgery was scheduled for Monday morning. On Sunday afternoon, I was resting in my hospital room when I heard voices in the hallway. I recognized them immediately. Fletcher, Gemma, Sutton, Cordelia, all 4 of my children, together for the first time in years. But they were not coming to see me. They were walking toward the cafeteria. I waited until they were gone. Then, I got out of bed, put on my robe, and followed them. I know. It sounds foolish. A 74-year-old man with a failing heart, shuffling through a hospital in his slippers to eavesdrop on his own children. But I had to know. I had to know what they said when they thought I could not hear. I found a seat near the vending machines, close enough to listen, far enough to stay invisible. Fletcher was talking first. He sounded impatient. He said, "I have reviewed his chart. The surgery has a good success rate. But, at his age, there is significant risk. We need to start thinking practically." Gemma nodded. She said, "I ran some projections. If he needs long-term care afterward, we are looking at costs that will exceed his assets within 18 months. Sutton leaned back and crossed his arms. He said, "So, what are we supposed to do? Flip a coin to see who takes him in? I do not have space in my life for this right now." Cordelia looked uncomfortable. She said, "I love Daddy. I do. But I cannot put my business on hold to become a full-time caregiver. My clients expect a certain level of availability." Fletcher said, "No one is asking you to sacrifice your career. We just need to be realistic. His house is worth maybe $200,000. The truck is junk. He has got some savings, but not enough to cover a decent facility for more than a year." Gemma said, "So we are looking at pooling resources, unless someone wants to take on the primary burden." No one volunteered. Sutton said, What about that land behind his house? The farm stuff. Is any of that worth anything? Fletcher shook his head. He said, I drove past it yesterday. It is just fields. Has not been worked in years. Probably worth more as a tax write-off than anything else. They laughed. They actually laughed. I sat there for another 10 minutes. I listened to my children discuss me like I was a problem to be solved. Like I was an equation with too many variables. Like I was already gone. Not once did any of them talk about visiting me. Not once did any of them ask how I was feeling. Not once did any of them mention that they loved me. They talked about money. They talked about logistics. They talked about who would be least inconvenienced by my existence. And then they got up, threw away their coffee cups, and walked back toward my room to pretend they cared. I took a different route. I made it back to my bed before they arrived. When they walked in, I smiled. I said, well, this is a nice surprise. All four of you together. They smiled back, and not one of them knew that I had heard everything. The surgery lasted 6 hours. I remember the anesthesiologist counting backward. I remember the cold of the operating table, and then I remember nothing until I woke up in recovery with a tube down my throat and more wires attached to me than I could count. I survived. The doctor said I was remarkably strong for my age. He said my heart responded well to the procedure. He said I would need several months of recovery, but with proper care, I could live another 10, maybe 15 years. When he told me this, I thought about the cafeteria. I thought about my children calculating my value. I thought about how they had already written me off. 10 more years. 15 if I was lucky. What would I do with that time? Cordelia stayed for 3 days after the surgery. She slept in the chair next to my bed. She brought me pudding cups from the cafeteria. She read to me from a magazine about interior design. I appreciated it. I did. But I also noticed that she spent most of her time on her phone, texting clients, answering emails, planning her escape. On the 3rd day, she said she had to get back to Philadelphia. She said she had a project deadline she could not miss. I told her I understood. She hugged me at the door and said, Daddy, please think about what we discussed. Selling the house, moving somewhere with staff who can help you. It is not giving up. It is being smart. I told her I would think about it. She left. Fletcher sent a fruit basket. The card said, wishing you a speedy recovery. Fletcher and Priscilla. I gave the fruit to the nurses. Gemma called once during my recovery. The call lasted 4 minutes. She asked if I needed her to research assisted living facilities in my area. I told her no. She sounded relieved. Sutton sent a text message that said, heard surgery went well. Proud of you, old man. He did not call. He did not visit. He did not offer anything else. I recovered at home, alone. A nurse came twice a week to check my vitals. A physical therapist came 3 times a week to help me rebuild my strength. I paid for all of it out of pocket. My children did not know this. They assumed Medicare was covering everything. They assumed I was scraping by on government assistance and the charity of strangers. Let them assume. During those long weeks of recovery, I had time to think. I thought about Lorraine, about how she would have handled this. She died 8 years ago, and there is not a day I do not miss her. I thought about my children, about who they used to be, about who they have become. I thought about the money, $60 million, sitting in accounts and trusts and properties, more than my children would ever need, more than their children would ever need. And I made a decision. I would leave them everything, every penny, every acre, every investment. But I would also leave them the truth. There is something people do not understand about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about the other person. It is about you. It is about releasing the poison before it kills you from the inside. I could have written my children out of my will. I could have left everything to charity. I could have donated it all to strangers who would have appreciated it more. But that would have been revenge. And revenge is a meal that leaves you hungrier than before. I did not want revenge. I wanted understanding. I wanted my children to know who I really was. Not the broke old man they pitied. Not the burden they calculated. Not the problem they discussed in hospital cafeterias. I wanted them to know the father who paid for surgeries and scholarships and seed rounds and business grants. The father who watched from the shadows. The father who never stopped loving them, even when they stopped seeing him. So, I did not change my will to punish them. I changed it to teach them. I called Harrison Aldridge the week after I got home from the hospital. Harrison has been my attorney for 23 years. He is the only person alive who knows the full extent of my wealth. He manages my trusts, my investments, my estate planning. I told him I wanted to add a letter to my will, a letter to be read aloud in front of my children. He asked me what I wanted to say. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Earl, are you sure you want to do this? Once they hear that letter, there is no going back." I said, "Harrison, I have been going back my whole life. It is time to go forward." He drew up the documents that same week. You have watched this long and felt something. If you still have not subscribed, I have to wonder if you are the kind of person who takes and never gives back. 6 months after my surgery, I called a meeting. Not at my house. At the law office of Harrison Aldridge, a man my children had never heard of. Harrison has been my attorney for 23 years. He manages my trusts, my investments, my estate. He knows more about my finances than anyone alive. I told Harrison I wanted to gather my children for a reading of my will. He asked if I was dying. I told him no. I told him I was very much alive, but I was done waiting. He smiled and said, "It is about time, Earl." I sent each of my children a formal letter on Harrison's letterhead. The letter said I was requesting their presence at a mandatory family estate meeting. It said their attendance was required for matters related to inheritance and asset distribution. Within 24 hours, all 4 of them had confirmed. Fletcher rearranged his schedule. Gemma postponed a client meeting. Sutton flew in from San Francisco. Cordelia arrived a day early. Funny how quickly they could make time when they thought there was money involved. The meeting was held on a Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Harrison's office is in a building downtown. Marble floors, leather chairs, the kind of place my children would expect a real attorney to work. I arrived early. I sat in the conference room alone, looking out the window at the town where I had lived my entire life. I thought about my father, about the blast furnaces, about the house with 1 bathroom, about all the years I had spent building something no one knew existed. And then the door opened, and my children walked in. They were nervous. I could see it in the way they moved, in the way they avoided eye contact, in the way they sat down too quickly and folded their hands like obedient students. Fletcher spoke first. He said, "Dad, are you okay? Is something wrong?" The letter made it sound serious. I smiled and said, "Nothing is wrong. I just thought it was time we had a conversation about the future." Gemma leaned forward. She said, "Is this about the house? Are you finally ready to sell?" I said, "Not exactly." Sutton shifted in his seat. He said, "Dad, whatever you need, we are here. We support you." I looked at Sutton. My son, who could not visit me in the hospital. My son, who sent a text message instead of picking up the phone. I said, "Thank you, Sutton. That means a lot." Cordelia reached over and squeezed my hand. She said, "Daddy, whatever this is, we will get through it together." I squeezed her hand back. And then Harrison walked in. Harrison Aldridge is 70 years old. He has been practicing law for 45 years. He has seen everything. But even he seemed to enjoy what was about to happen. He sat down at the head of the table. He opened a leather folder. He looked at my children over the rim of his reading glasses. He said, "Thank you all for coming. I know you are curious about why you are here, so I will get straight to the point." He paused. "Your father has asked me to review his estate with you today. This includes all assets, investments, and trusts, currently held in his name or under entities he controls." Fletcher nodded impatiently. He said, "We understand. What is the total value we are looking at?" Harrison smiled. He said, the total estimated value of Earl Meacham's estate, as of the most recent assessment, is $63,427,000. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. I watched my children's faces. I watched the confusion, the disbelief, the slow, dawning realization that everything they thought they knew was wrong. Gemma spoke first. Her voice was barely a whisper. She said, I am sorry. Did you say 63 million? Harrison nodded. That is correct. $63,427,000. This includes approximately $14 million in land and agricultural holdings, $11 million in commercial real estate, $22 million in diversified investment accounts, and the remainder in private equity stakes, trusts, and liquid assets. Fletcher's mouth was open. He looked like a man who had just been told the sky was green. He said, that is not possible. Dad lives in a rundown house. He drives a truck from the 90s. He eats TV dinners. I spoke for the first time. I said, I know. Sutton stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. He said, I do not understand. You let us think you were broke. You let us worry about how to take care of you. You let us... He stopped. I finished his sentence for him. I let you show me who you really are. The room was silent again. I looked at each of my children. Fletcher, Gemma, Sutton, Cordelia. I said, for the past 20 years, I have watched you. I have listened to you. I have heard what you say about me when you think. I cannot hear. 6 months after my surgery, I called a meeting. Not at my house. At the law office of Harrison Aldridge, a man my children had never heard of. Harrison has been my attorney for 23 years. He manages my trusts, my investments, my estate. He knows more about my finances than anyone alive. I told Harrison I wanted to gather my children for a reading of my will. He asked if I was dying. I told him no. I told him I was very much alive, but I was done waiting. He smiled and said, it is about time, Earl. I sent each of my children a formal letter on Harrison's letterhead. The letter said I was requesting their presence at a mandatory family estate meeting. It said their attendance was required for matters related to inheritance and asset distribution. Within 24 hours, all 4 of them had confirmed. Fletcher rearranged his schedule. Gemma postponed a client meeting. Sutton flew in from San Francisco. Cordelia arrived a day early. Funny how quickly they could make time when they thought there was money involved. The meeting was held on a Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Harrison's office is in a building downtown. Marble floors, leather chairs, the kind of place my children would expect a real attorney to work. I arrived early. I sat in the conference room alone, looking out the window at the town where I had lived my entire life. I thought about my father, about the blast furnaces, about the house with 1 bathroom, about all the years I had spent building something no one knew existed. And then the door opened, and my children walked in. They were nervous. I could see it in the way they moved, in the way they avoided eye contact, in the way they sat down too quickly and folded their hands like obedient students. Fletcher spoke first. He said, Dad, are you okay? Is something wrong? The letter made it sound serious. I smiled and said, nothing is wrong. I just thought it was time we had a conversation about the future. Gemma leaned forward. She said, is this about the house? Are you finally ready to sell? I said, not exactly. Sutton shifted in his seat. He said, Dad, whatever you need, we are here. We support you. I looked at Sutton. My son, who could not visit me in the hospital. My son, who sent a text message instead of picking up the phone. I said, thank you, Sutton. That means a lot. Cordelia reached over and squeezed my hand. She said, Daddy, whatever this is, we will get through it together. I squeezed her hand back. And then Harrison walked in. Harrison Aldridge is 70 years old. He has been practicing law for 45 years. He has seen everything. But even he seemed to enjoy what was about to happen. He sat down at the head of the table. He opened a leather folder. He looked at my children over the rim of his reading glasses. He said, thank you all for coming. I know you are curious about why you are here, so I will get straight to the point. He paused. Your father has asked me to review his estate with you today. This includes all assets, investments, and trusts, currently held in his name or under entities he controls. Fletcher nodded impatiently. He said, We understand. What is the total value we are looking at? Harrison smiled. He said, The total estimated value of Earl Meacham's estate, as of the most recent assessment, is $63,427,000. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. I watched my children's faces. I watched the confusion, the disbelief, the slow, dawning realization that everything they thought they knew was wrong. Gemma spoke first. Her voice was barely a whisper. She said, I am sorry. Did you say 63 million? Harrison nodded. That is correct. $63,427,000. This includes approximately $14 million in land and agricultural holdings, $11 million in commercial real estate, $22 million in diversified investment accounts, and the remainder in private equity stakes, trusts, and liquid assets. Fletcher's mouth was open. He looked like a man who had just been told the sky was green. He said, That is not possible. Dad lives in a rundown house. He drives a truck from the 90s. He eats TV dinners. I spoke for the first time. I said, I know. Sutton stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. He said, I do not understand. You let us think you were broke. You let us worry about how to take care of you. You let us... He stopped. I finished his sentence for him. I let you show me who you really are. The room was silent again. I looked at each of my children. Fletcher, Gemma, Sutton, Cordelia. I said, For the past 20 years, I have watched you. I have listened to you. I have heard what you say about me when you think. I cannot hear. I looked at Fletcher. I heard you at the hospital, calculating my worth, deciding I was a burden. I looked at Gemma. I heard you suggest I apply for Medicaid, like I was a charity case. I looked at Sutton. I heard you ask who was going to get stuck with me, like I was a piece of furniture no one wanted. I looked at Cordelia. I heard you say you could not put your life on hold to take care of me. Your own father. Cordelia started crying. She said, Daddy, I did not mean. I held up my hand. Let me finish. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I said, This is a letter I wrote 6 months ago, after my surgery, after I heard what you said in that cafeteria. I handed the envelope to Harrison. I said, Read it aloud, please. Harrison opened the envelope. He cleared his throat, and then he began to read. Harrison began to read. To my children, if you are hearing this, it means I have finally decided to tell you the truth. For over 40 years, I have lived a double life. Not out of deception, out of love, out of a desire to understand who you really are. I wanted to know if you would love me when I had nothing to offer. I wanted to know if you would call me, visit me, include me in your lives, not because of what I could give you, but because of who I am. I am sorry to say that I got my answer. But this letter is not about blame. It is about truth. Let me tell you what you never knew. Harrison paused. My children were frozen, tears already forming. He continued, Fletcher, when you were 11 years old, you needed heart surgery. The insurance denied it. I never told you because I did not want you to feel like a burden. You were never a burden. You were my son. Fletcher made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Gemma, I paid off your law school loans anonymously. $64,000. You thought it was a scholarship. It was me. Because I believed in you. Even when you stopped believing in me. Gemma covered her mouth with her hands. Sutton, your first investor was not a venture fund. It was me. Patterson Capital was a shell company I created. $50,000 that became your seed round. I watched you build your company from the shadows. I was proud of you every single day. Sutton sat down slowly. His face was pale. Cordelia, the small business grant you received came from a foundation I funded. I donated $25,000 specifically so you could receive that grant. I wanted you to believe you earned it, because you did. You just had a father willing to clear the path." Cordelia was sobbing openly now. Harrison continued reading. "I am telling you this not to make you feel guilty. I am telling you this because you deserve to know the truth. I have loved you every moment of your lives. I have been proud of you in ways I never knew how to express. But I have also been disappointed. Not in your success, in your blindness. You looked at my house and saw poverty. You looked at my truck and saw failure. You never looked at me. You never asked about my life, my memories, my dreams. And so I waited. Year after year. Birthday after birthday. I waited for one of you to see me. None of you did." Harrison read the final section. "Despite all of this, I am leaving you everything. Every dollar. Every acre. Every investment. Not because you earned it, because I love you. And love is not something you earn. It is something you give freely, even when it is not deserved. My only request is this: do better. See the people in your lives who are quietly waiting to be noticed. Call your parents. Visit your grandparents. Show up for the people who showed up for you. I forgive you. I forgave you a long time ago. Now forgive yourselves, and do better. With all my love, your father, Earl Meacham." Harrison set down the letter. No one spoke. 4 successful adults sitting in a room full of money, weeping like children. They had inherited a fortune, but they had also inherited the truth. If this story has not made you feel something by now, I do not know what will. Subscribe, or tell me in the comments what is stopping you. Harrison set down the letter. No one moved. I looked at my children. 4 successful adults. A cardiologist, a lawyer, an entrepreneur, a designer, exposed, broken, weeping in a conference room surrounded by documents worth more than they ever imagined. They had inherited a fortune, but the look on their faces told me they finally understood. Money was never the point. Fletcher spoke first. His voice was broken. He said, "Dad, I am so sorry. I did not know. I never." I held up my hand. I said, "I know you did not know. That was the point." Gemma stood up and walked around the table. She knelt beside my chair and took my hand. She said, "I have been a terrible daughter. I do not know how to fix this." I said, "You start by trying." Sutton just sat there, staring at the table. He said, "I should have visited you in the hospital. I should have been there." I said, "Yes, you should have." He nodded. He did not argue. He did not make excuses. Cordelia came over and hugged me. She whispered in my ear, "I love you, Daddy. I am so sorry. I love you so much." I held my daughter, my baby girl. I said, "I love you too. I always have. I always will." We sat in that conference room for another hour. We talked, really talked. For the first time in years, they asked questions about my life, about the investments, about how I built everything without anyone knowing. But more than that, they asked questions about me. Fletcher asked about my childhood, about what it was like growing up with a father who worked the furnaces. Gemma asked about Lorraine, about how we met, about what I missed most about her. Sutton asked about my dreams, about whether I had regrets. Cordelia asked about the song, the one I used to hum when she was a baby. She asked me to hum it again. I did. And for a moment, we were a family again. That was 3 months ago. Things are different now. Fletcher calls every Sunday. Not to check on me, to talk. Gemma visited last month. She stayed for a whole week. We sat on the porch and watched the fields behind the house. My fields. She finally understood why I never sold them. Sutton flew me out to San Francisco, first class. He introduced me to his team as the original investor. He told them the truth about Patterson Capital. He cried when he said it. Cordelia comes every other weekend now. She redecorated my living room. She said she wanted me to have something beautiful to look at. I told her I already did. I was looking at her. I do not know how much time I have left. The doctors say my heart is strong, that the surgery bought me years. But I am 74 years old. I have lived a full life. I have buried a wife. I have raised 4 children. I have built something that will last long after I am gone. And now, finally, I have my family back. Some people might say I was cruel, that I tested my children, that I manipulated them into revealing their worst selves. Maybe that is true, but I would rather know the truth than live a lie. And I would rather give my children a chance to change than let them discover their failures after I am gone. The money will be there when I die. But the time we have now, these phone calls, these visits, these moments on the porch, that is the real inheritance. That is what matters. If you are still watching, let me leave you with this. Quiet people are not weak. We are patient. We are observant. We are waiting to see who you really are. And we remember everything. Call your parents today, not tomorrow, today. Because one day, the phone will ring and they will not answer. And you will spend the rest of your life wishing you had said something while you still had the chance. I am Earl Meacham. I am 74 years old. I am a retired steelworker from rural Pennsylvania. And I was never broke. I was just paying attention. That is my story. If it meant something to you, subscribe. If you felt something and still refuse, tell me why in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, take care of the people who love you before it is too late.